Boldwood presents Deadly Mistake, written by Rob Sinclair and read by David Thorpe. Chapter 1. Over an hour since the sun had disappeared beyond the frazzled fields on the horizon, yet the temperature had barely dropped. Sweltering. The choking air remained thick with moisture, and Simon Peake's t-shirt and shorts clung to his body as he sat back in the wooden porch chair, his skin glistening in the faint glow of light from the flickering bulb above, the incessant drone of cicadas all around him. He sighed and took a swig from his beer, not as chilled now as 2 minutes before when he'd pulled it from the freezer. He downed it. Nothing else to do tonight, so he decided to get another. He stood up from the chair, his bones creaking as much as the warped wood beneath his feet, a stinging discomfort pulsing across recently healed wounds where the scars told only a tiny part of that story. Sometimes he felt several decades older than he was, the amount of punishment his body had taken, particularly from most recently in New York. He headed inside. The screen door slapped back into place, and the superheated air hit him. Close to 100 outside, probably 130 inside, given there was no AC in a ramshackle home like this. Before he reached the fridge, a beeping noise caught his attention above the muffled din of the cicadas. He took his phone out and navigated to the camera feeds. Had expected, hoped, that the camera 300 yards away at the boundary of the property had picked up the movement of a nighttime creature, a coyote most likely. But no, a car. Peake spun around and dashed toward the back door and flicked the switch for the porch light, then did the same with the kitchen light, plunging the house into blackness. For all of a couple of seconds, anyway, until the beams of the car's headlights crested the hill on the south side and swept down toward the house, the light twisting and morphing across the floors and walls of the open-plan space around Peake. He went to the cupboard by the front door, checked the shotgun, loaded, checked the handgun, loaded too. He left that in place behind the toolbox and took the shotgun and a handful of extra shells, which he stuffed into the pocket of his linen shorts. The house went momentarily dark again as the car continued its approach on the twisting, undulating dirt lane. A slow approach, no revving engine, only the sound of tyres on the rough surface getting louder all the time. Shotgun in hand, Peake moved back to the kitchen, away from the front door. He crouched down beneath the counter to look at the camera feeds again. Split screen, so he could see both the front stoop and the back porch. The car came to a stop at the front. The lights flicked off, which threw him into darkness once more, except for the glow from his phone. 3 men stepped from the car, their forms only just visible in the moonlight. Maybe he should have gone for the much more expensive night vision cameras after all. The men stood side by side at the front of the car, staring toward the house. He could hear their muted, gruff voices through the thin walls of the house, but couldn't make out any of the conversation. After a while, they walked in unison toward the house, the taller and lankier of the 3 eventually breaking away as they neared the porch. The front security light flicked on, and the man at the front flinched and whipped a hand up to his face to shield from the glare. But not before Peake got a glimpse of his face. What the fuck was he doing here? The other 2 paused. One of them reached his hand behind to the waistband of his jeans. So he was armed, although he didn't pull the gun free. Peake wondered about the third man. No obvious sign of a weapon on him, but a small bag was hanging off of one shoulder. Peake remained rooted as the heavy thuds shook the front door, vibrated through the whole front of the old wooden house. No words accompanied the hefty knocks. Peake's eyes stayed glued to the phone screen. The camera looked directly down on the three men, giving a not-so-great view of their faces, but he was sure he didn't recognise the two at the back. Both were white, average-looking guys. The one with the bag had a shiny bald head, the other had a muss of hair on top and a thick bushy beard like a Viking warrior. The man at the front, younger, dumber, perhaps. "Peake, it's me, Adam. Open up!" he shouted out. Peake didn't move. "Peake, please! We need your help!" The thuds came again. Not from Adam this time, but from the guy with the bag who had stepped up to the door and shouldered Adam aside. When he finished, he stared up at the camera, kept his gaze there a few seconds. "Simon Peake," he shouted. "We know you're home. Open the damn door." "Peake, please!" Adam shouted. He looked over his shoulder toward the car, his edginess clear. "I know you're home. Your truck's here. And who the hell would go out for a walk on a night like this in the middle of nowhere?" Fair point, but Peake still didn't move. The three men had a brief, hushed exchange, cupping their mouths to further muffle their voices. Then the bag guy looked at his watch, glanced to the car, then back up to the camera. "Your friend here said you were the guy who could help us. A bit of cleaning work, if you catch my drift." Peake gritted his teeth. "There's 10G here for you, up front." He pulled the bag from his shoulder, opened it, and pushed it toward the camera. Sure enough, 4 bundles of notes were stuffed inside. 10G, Beardy said. "Fuck, if this idiot don't want it, we might as well clean up ourselves and keep the money." Baldy nodded in response and zipped the bag back up, but neither of them moved from the spot. 10 seconds, then we're gone. The money, too." Peake kept his focus on Adam, who looked even more jittery now. 10. He hadn't seen Adam in several days. Apparently, he'd headed down to Florida for some work. 9. It looked like he hadn't learned much from his previous life lessons, given he'd ridden back up here with these 2 no-good goons. 8. "This asshole," Beardy said, shaking his head with obvious disdain, disgruntlement too. 7. "Why don't we just bust the door down?" 6. "If he's inside, hide him from us." 5. "Fucking get rid of him too, messing us around like this." 4. "No, he's good for it," Adam said. "Trust me." 3. Thud, thud, thud. "Peake, you asshole," Adam said. "You're making me look real bad here." "Open the door, or I'm just gonna break it," Beardy shouted. "And then I'm gonna break you." Out came the handgun. 2. Baldy paused. The 3 men stared at each other, then glanced to the camera. Beardy pointed the gun toward it, mimicked firing a shot, as though doing so was supposed to intimidate Peake or make him more likely to open the door or something. "Let's get out of here. We need to get this done tonight," Baldy said to his buddy. "Guys, no, he's not here, is he?" Baldy said, slapping Adam's shoulder. "Yeah, but I might just come back another time," Beardy said, "wasting our time like this. 1. A few seconds pause again, before, head shaking and grumbling under their breaths, Baldy and Beardy retreated down the steps. Adam eventually turned and scuttled behind them. Peake rose from his position, tiptoed to the front door. The car engine grumbled to life, the headlights flicked on. Peake thought a moment more. He knew Adam. He didn't know the other two. He didn't like that Adam had brought them here. What had the kid told them about him? Anything at all, even his name, was too much. Cleaning work. Peake thought he knew what that meant. It meant Adam's loose tongue and his willingness to please his two chump companions had got the better of him. At what risk to Peake? Could he take the chance of them leaving without knowing the full story? Plus, the money. Whatever the situation, 10 grand was a lot of money. His money, really. Peake opened the front door, pointed the shotgun toward the car. The engine shut down again. The lights turned off. The two front doors opened, and the men half stepped out, shielding themselves behind the metal and glass. Adam got out of the back, seemingly not as bothered about the threat of the shotgun as he took 2 steps clear of the car as he approached Peake.
Jesus, I knew you were home. What the fuck?
Show me your hands, Peake shouted. Adam paused in his step.
What the hell is this?
Beardy shouted over. I said, show me your hands. Peake took a step forward. All of you. The 3 men each brought their empty hands up above their shoulders. Peake was a little surprised.
Step away from the car. Bring the money with you. The bag's in the car, Baldy said. You want me to lower my hand to get it?
Do it, Peake said. Baldy slowly reached for the bag, then both men stepped out into the open. Weapons? Peake asked.
What do you think?
Baldy said. Toss them to me.
Fuck you!
Peake, come on, Adam said. We're not here to... You want this to end in anything other than a firefight? Get rid of your weapons, all of you. Adam lifted his shirt to show he had nothing stashed. Surprisingly, the other 2 men slowly pulled out their handguns, holding them pincered between 2 fingers to show they weren't about to turn the weapons on Peake.
But we're not giving them to you, Baldy said. We'll leave them in the car.
And before Peake could suggest otherwise, they both gently tossed the guns in through the open car doors.
Satisfied?
Beardy asked. Enough, Peake said. All 3 men remained on the spot, looking from one to the other. Peake's finger remained on the trigger of the shotgun as he moved the barrel slowly back and forth between the targets.
So,
Baldy said, sounding fed up with the situation more than anything else,
are we doing this or not?
Peake finally took his finger from the trigger and pulled the barrel of the shotgun down toward the ground.
Come on in,
Peake said, stepping to the side and beckoning the men over with a wide smile forced on his face. Chapter 2. Adam's companions moved inside first. Peake momentarily grabbed the youngster before he joined them. What the hell? Peake mouthed. Adam shrugged his shoulders, a pleading look on his face, before he headed on in without a word in response. Peake followed the 3 into the house, turning on the lights across the hall, kitchen, living room, before he closed the front door. The men remained hovering in the small, open space.
Take a seat,
he said, indicating the threadbare brown sofa.
Some place you got here,
Beardy said mockingly. Peake said nothing, but glared until all 3 men had edged toward the living room area, though none of them bothered to take a seat. Peake didn't blame them. He hated the crappy sofa too. Adam remained closest to Peake, that pleading look still plastered on his face, as though he couldn't understand why Peake was making this situation hard.
You going to put that thing down?
Baldy asked, indicating the shotgun still hanging lazily in Peake's grip. Peake did so, but not because he felt the need to do as he was told, simply because he knew he didn't need it right now. He placed the weapon on the kitchen counter, still far closer to him than it was to them, should he need it. They'd left their guns in the car, supposedly. He had to expect they both remained armed. Another hidden gun, a knife, something, somewhere.
So, I know Adam, but who are you two?
Peake asked. Baldy raised an eyebrow. Beardy kind of grunted.
You're Brit,
Beardy said.
kind of.
Kind of? Baldy asked.
I've been around. Don't sound like you've been around here much.
Not for long.
So, how'd a Brit end up in South Georgia then?
Beardy asked. I came for the weather. Baldy very nearly smiled. Beardy looked nonplussed.
I asked for your names,
Peake said.
You don't need to know our names,
Baldy said.
The start of a long and prosperous business relationship,
Peake said, with just enough sarcasm to see the agitation in both men in front of him rise a little more.
McGinty recommended you to us,
Baldy said with a glance at Adam.
Told us you were the man to help us here.
Peake caught Adam's eye, but the youngster quickly looked away.
This is stupid,
Beardy said to Baldy.
Should never have listened to the kid. Let's do it ourselves. Keep the 10G. Hardy's going to be pissed if we're not back soon.
Hardy, Peake said.
Who's Hardy?
All three stared at him.
Your boss?
Peake asked.
The man who put the money in this bag, who wants someone else to do this, not us. Separation or something. So if you screw us here, you're really screwing him, and you really don't want to do that.
Peake, seriously? Listen to them, Adam said, but Peake waved his interjection away.
10 grand for what?
The men exchanged another quick glance.
Cleaning,
Baldy said.
Oh, you want me to mop your floors?
Beardy snorted and shook his head.
Funny guy. You know what we mean,
Baldy said.
McGinty said you're the guy for this. I'm guessing you've done this shit before. Otherwise, I'm not sure why we're here.
Adam was doing everything to avert Peake's glare now. What the hell had he told these two men?
Look, we just brought the body. The money,
Baldy said.
We'll leave both with you, and you don't need to see us again.
It's here? Peake asked.
Yeah, it's here,
Baldy replied, sounding more irritated by the second.
Slowly cooking in the trunk. If you take any fucking longer, it's going to turn into a feeding frenzy for every damn maggot in the state.
One body?
You saw the car. How many you think we got in that trunk?
Depends on the size of them. And how many pieces. Takes up less space if they're all chopped up.
We ain't the butchers. Apparently, you are. Although I'm starting to wonder about that now.
He glared at Adam as he said that. The kid was becoming more and more jittery, not just at the agitation and threat from his buddies, but probably because his whole master plan was now unravelling before his eyes.
So you want me to get rid of a body for you?
Peake asked. Baldy squirmed a little at Peake's brazenness, as though he thought someone would overhear, even though there wasn't another property within 2 miles.
No, we don't. Hardy does,
Beardy said.
Hardy, who I don't know. Who gives a crap who you do and don't know? Are you doing this, or do we got a problem?
Both men tensed, as though Beardy's ultimatum might turn the situation into a bloody confrontation. Well, that was down to them.
"Who is it?" Peake asked. "You don't need to know," Baldy said. "Do you know?" "Yeah, we know, but you don't need to," Beardy said.
"I say I do. 10 grand for getting rid of a corpse. Not so bad if it's a nobody. If it's a cop, a politician, the president."
"You'd think we have the dead president in the trunk of our car,"
Beardy said, disdain now dripping with every word, and spread across his face too. "Do you?"
"No, we don't," Baldy said. "It's a nobody. 10 grand for a nobody. You don't need to know nothing more than that."
"Did you do it?"
"What?"
Baldy said, sounding fed up, like he'd really had enough of the whole conversation now. "Did you kill them?"
"What does that matter?"
"Just trying to figure out who I'm working with here."
"You're doing this for Hardy."
"Who I don't know."
"This is fucked up. We should get out of here,"
Beardy said, taking a couple of steps toward Baldy, closer to the exit, as though hoping his buddy would turn and head out too. But Baldy stayed on the spot.
"Do we have a problem?"
Baldy said to Peake. "Show me the money."
"I already did."
"Toss the bag to me so I can check it."
"No,"
Baldy said.
"We go outside, we get the body out of our car. We give you the money as we leave."
"You want my help? That money is mine. Toss the bag now, or I'll come over and take it from you. Then this ends with me having to get rid of 4 bodies tonight, not 1.
"Peake, please,"
Adam butted in. "And that's no big deal for me. After all, Adam told you about me, didn't he?" Peake sent daggers, but Adam's eyes were to the floor. He knew he'd fucked up coming here. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the cicadas drifting in from outside.
"Okay, Mr. Tough Guy," Baldy said, raising his hands. "We didn't come here for trouble." "This time,"
Beardy added, clearly not wanting Peake to forget that he was the edgiest of the two.
"Here."
Baldy underarmed the bag toward Peake, who caught the strap, his eyes not leaving the men in case the move was a distraction for them to launch an attack. It wasn't. They didn't move, as Peake diverted his eyes to the bag and unzipped the top and felt around inside. Cash. 10 grand? That or something close. He put the bag down on the counter next to the shotgun. Peake smiled. "Let's go see what you've got for me then." All 3 men glanced toward the money bag and the shotgun as they made their way to the exit. Peake left both in place to follow them outside. Cool air. Cooler than inside, anyway. Peake got a good look at the car as they approached, the arc of the security lights reaching past the vehicle's front end. A battered old sedan. Perhaps dark red, or a mucky brown, or maybe that was just the rust. It was difficult to tell because the metalwork was so badly dented and the paint mottled and peeling. Too many years without attention. Too many years out in the baking sunshine. The old vehicle looked like it belonged in the dusty grounds of Peake's home. The men walked past the front doors of the car to the rear. A good sign. They decided not to reach for the weapons that lay on the seats inside. A Florida plate. Real or fake, it told a story. Peake caught Adam's eye for a split second as Baldy took a key from his pocket. Florida. Adam had gone to Florida for some work. He'd come back with 2 grunts and a dead body, and in a whole heap of deep shit. Peake kept a couple of yards away from the 3, one eye on the men, one eye on the trunk lid as Baldy stuck the key in the lock and used a bit of force to pop the likely rusted mechanism. Baldy yanked open the creaky trunk lid and stepped back toward his companion, as though giving space for Peake to move forward and take a look inside. A dark space, given the angle of the car to the light at the front of the house.
"She's all yours,"
Baldy said. She. Peake stared into the darkened space as his eyes adjusted, moonlight creeping over the form inside. Clothing, dark and glistening with wet blood. Flesh similarly stained. A face, tucked into the corner of the cramped space, too far into the dark for him to properly make her out, but no reason at all why he'd know this poor woman anyway. She.
"Come on, lover boy. You get to do whatever you want to her once we've gone. But let's just pull her out of there so we can leave you two in peace."
Peake ignored the jibe and reached inside to pull on the dead woman's shoulders to bring her head out of the crevice at the back of the trunk. Eyes open but unmoving. Dark hair. A face spattered with blood. No, he didn't recognize her.
"Seriously, Peake, get her out so we can get out of here,"
Baldy said. "You take her legs," Peake said.
"Do it yourself. She only weighed about 120 pounds, even before she lost all her blood."
Peake grimaced at the heartless words. "Just give me a damn hand here, will you?" he demanded. Baldy grumbled, but was soon by Peake's side. Peake still had his hands around the woman's shoulders, and Baldy took hold of her ankles. But Peake still didn't make a move to pull the body out.
"She's a looker, right?" Baldy said. "You should have seen her before this."
She wore jeans, a simple strapped top. Her watch, necklace, rings remained in place. Everything tainted with her blood. Coming from where? Gashes to her torso, arms, a large puncture wound in her gut, and another in her chest where blood had gushed out over her clothes. A frenzied attack, not a quick, clean kill. A kill?
"Peake, what the fuck are you doing?" Baldy said. "Come on."
A kill? No. Not a kill. As he leaned in further, he felt it again, more sure of himself this time. Not the lightest of light nighttime breezes, but definitely cool air moving against his cheek. Coming from her. Peake turned to Baldy. The look on his own face must have tipped the guy off. Baldy knew. Peake could tell by the sudden worry in the man's eyes, a worry which exploded when Peake let go of the woman and sprang into action.
"Fuck, Evan!"
Baldy shouted as he reeled back. Beardy reached down to his ankle, a knife. Baldy had nothing and found himself caught between Beardy and Peake. He chose to fight rather than back down and swung a meaty fist Peake's way. Peake swiveled to avoid the blow, lifted his foot up and crashed it down onto the side of Baldy's knee. The guy squealed in pain as his leg buckled and he collapsed onto his good knee. Peake lunged toward Beardy, who thrust the knife forward, aiming for Peake's abdomen.
"Peake, no!"
Adam shrieked. Peake took no notice. He blocked the knife, forearm to forearm, grabbed the wrist with his other hand, twisted the guy's arm unnaturally until the elbow socket popped. Beardy didn't scream, but clenched his teeth. His eyes popped like his elbow just had as he stared at the knife still clutched in a hand that was now entirely useless to him. Not useless to Peake. He grabbed the fist and squeezed and turned the knife upward and thrust the tip up. The metal plunged into Beardy's neck, right under his chin. 3 inches of blade disappeared, and Peake pulled the knife free, taking the weapon from Beardy's grip before kicking the man away. He plummeted to the dirt, gargling his last breaths. As Peake turned, he noticed the metal in Baldy's hand. Peake ducked and dodged as the guy hobbled on one leg and opened fire with his handgun. Adam yelled in pain. Shit, the kid was hit. Peake didn't look to see how bad it was. Kept moving. Kicked up dirt, which caused Baldy to cower. He swept up behind and wrapped his forearm around the guy's head, pulling his face up to expose his neck. He fired off everything in the gun, nothing more than desperation, as Peake drew the edge of the knife across Baldy's skin, the blade cutting long and deep, easily penetrating the carotid artery. Blood hissed out as Peake let go, and Baldy crumpled down in a heap next to his friend. Both lay there, drawing their last breaths. Neither would survive. Adam. Peake swiveled, expected to see a body sprawled on the floor. Nothing. Adam was gone. Peake looked into the darkness, pinched his eyes together as though the extra focus would help. "Adam!" Peake yelled out. No response. No sounds of him breathing or scuttling away into the night. Peake knelt and touched the dark, wet patch in the dirt. Blood. Adam was hit. How badly, Peake didn't know. He rose up to his feet. "Adam! I'll help you! Don't make this worse!" Still nothing. Peake thought for a moment. No point in trekking out into the darkness. He had more immediate matters to deal with. Peake went back to the trunk and peered inside at the woman. She certainly looked dead enough, but... He pushed 2 fingers against the side of her neck, a faint pulse. Unlike the men who had put her in there, she was still alive, whoever the hell she was. Looking at the space now, Peake realised it was easily big enough for more than one body, despite Baldy's earlier assertion there was only one in the trunk. He should know. He had enough experience of these things, as Adam McGinty well knew. Peake would find out exactly what the hell Adam had told them when he caught up with that idiot. For now, it was time to get started on cleanup. He had a long night ahead of him. Chapter 3. The cold water of the shower felt like heaven on his skin, helping to soothe every aching muscle. He tipped his head back and closed his eyes, letting the water cascade over his face for a few seconds, initially enjoying the sensation. But after a while, gory images, not only from the last couple of hours, as he'd cut the trash down to size, but from his often violent past. He shivered, opened his eyes, and looked down to his feet where dirty water swirled. Mud. Blood. No, seeing that didn't help at all. His heavy heartbeats aligned with the rhythmic thudding of the water on his back. His eyes tracked the liquid running along the grout lines as his mind was pulled deeper and deeper into the memory. Blood. Pain. Gunshots to his back, chest, gut, to go along with the gory gashes and slashes from a horrific beating he'd somehow fought his way out of. Somehow survived. But not without lasting damage both to his body and his mind. Neither would fully recover from his ordeal in New York. He'd headed south after that, on the run, but mainly simply for a fresh start at life. Not the first time he'd tried that. And it seemed like not much fresh was left about this new life already. He turned the water off and pulled himself back to reality before sliding back the grimy, yellowed shower curtain. He grabbed the towel from where he'd left it on the sink. He quickly dried himself, leaving smudgy brown marks across the fabric, showing he'd too hastily turned off the water. It was fine. He was cleaner now than before, more refreshed. Even if by the time he was putting on some clean clothes, sweat droplets were already popping up across his clammy skin, not just from the heat, but from the exertion. He wanted to be outside in the relative cool as soon as he could. He hadn't intended to say goodbye to this place tonight, but he didn't have much choice now. Next time, air conditioning. Or a different area altogether, somewhere not as hot. He'd have to leave town. He knew that. But not yet. Not until he had some answers. Where the hell was Adam? Peake thumped the wall in frustration, ignored the throbbing in his fist as he moved into the bedroom. He quickly packed some clothes into a holdall. He had a second bag and box too for the few other things he wanted to take with him. A small cache of weapons, ammo, the wireless security camera system, medication. He had the basics, but he'd need more if he was to take care of this woman, revive her, figure out who she was and what to do with her. He'd have to wait until morning to get supplies, only a few hours away in reality. Sleep? At some point, but not right now. Someone, Hardy, wanted the woman dead. But she wasn't dead. So, sooner or later, her being alive was going to cause Peake a problem. Not to mention the issue of Adam. Peake needed to find him before he caused even more trouble, and regardless of whether he was now friend or foe. That all probably depended on who caught up with him first. Peake placed his things in the back of his truck, then opened the rear passenger door to check on the woman sprawled across the back seats. Still unconscious. Her pulse remained slow but steady. He'd done what he could for her now. Stitched the worst of her wounds, put some clean clothes on her. His clothes, which were big and baggy on her small frame. He'd cobbled together a makeshift saline drip to help combat the effects of blood loss, dehydration. For now, she was stable enough, even if he still had no idea if she'd ever wake up. Even if she did, brain damage was a real possibility, given the state she was in. Adam and his friends had thought her dead. Perhaps she even had been at some point, before somehow getting a second chance. It didn't take long for the brain to become permanently damaged through lack of oxygen when the heart failed, even for a short time. No way of knowing yet. Just like he still knew nothing about her. No identification in the car at all, just her and her clothes and the jewellery she still wore. Something he did know now, the names of Beardy and Baldy. Evan Huggins, Tyler Kittle. Not much left of those guys now, but, like Adam, both men had carried their wallets, IDs. The sedan they had driven to Peake's place had a Florida plate. He'd checked the registration, but his best guess was that it was a fake. Still, their IDs. He'd memorised the information. 2 names, 2 addresses, both local, at least within 50 miles of here. He'd check out both places soon enough. Like the men, the IDs were no more. He'd left those in the car, which was most likely still burning in the wooded area 5 miles south of Peake's home. No, not his home. Just a place he'd stayed a while. There'd be little left of the car by morning. As for the remains of the men, Peake had done the best he could given time and available tools, materials. Ideally, he'd have buried the bodies, the pieces at least, with lime, which would have helped to quickly decompose the flesh and bone. Or used a strong acid to turn everything into a mushy pulp, which could be discarded here and there. Fertilizer, animal feed, whatever. Instead, he'd hacked the bodies apart in the bathroom and dumped the parts in shallow graves across the farmland and woodland. Most pieces would be scavenged within a few hours. Vultures, coyotes, the main carnivores out here, who'd be grateful for the easy meal. If a person came across the remains and the police got involved, they'd still have a hard time figuring it all out anytime soon. Peake shook his head to erase the gruesome images. The biggest risk for Peake right now wasn't what remained of Huggins and Kittle, but Adam McGinty and the building in front of him. He'd find Adam sooner or later. This house, a problem. Hardy had sent those men out to kill and dispose of the woman. Sooner or later, someone would realise those men were missing, and sooner or later, others would come looking here. Police possibly too, which was why he had to destroy as much evidence of his and their presence as he could. He walked back toward the house, up the stairs, pushed open the front door. He held no emotion to this place. It had served a purpose. He lit the match and tossed it toward the puddle on the floor. The fuel ignited with a whoosh and quickly sucked the available oxygen toward it, causing air to pulse against Peake's face. Within seconds, flames had taken hold of furniture, drapes, and were licking up the walls to the ceiling. Peake backstepped to the door, then turned and, feeling nothing at all, carried on to his truck. Peake looked from the twisting lane ahead and to the orange glow in his rearview mirror. The structure had gone up like a matchstick house, the abundant wood, varnish, paint, and all the already superheated dry air providing the perfect conditions for an all-consuming fire. By daylight, nothing of the structure would remain. No fire engine would make it out in time to save the old house. For starters, it'd require someone actually calling 911. Unlikely, as by the time Peake reached the road, the building, the flames, were already out of sight beyond the hill. He glanced in the rear view just one more time. Not even any smoke visible yet in the night sky. The fire was burning too hot and clean. He momentarily looked to the woman spread across the back seats before returning his focus to the road. She was fine. As fine as she could be, anyway. He turned left, heading toward the nearest town in that direction. Prenticeville, some 5 miles away. A rundown place with only a few hundred houses and little by way of jobs or prospects. Did that explain why young men like Adam McGinty were drawn to the supposed easy money of criminal life? Yes and no. Regardless, at a little before 2 a.m. on a Friday night, there was still a good chance that the town's only bar, Slug's Tavern, remained open. If people wanted to stay and drink, the owner generally let them. 6 other cars remained in the parking lot of the bar when he arrived, but Peake guessed there'd be many more people inside. 5 of the vehicles were big pickup trucks, beloved in this part of the country, where size and macho manliness were important to so many. The other car was a tiny, battered old thing. Jen's car. A pang of guilt jostled inside Peake's gut, but he shut it down as quickly as it had come. He was too damn good at doing that. Peake parked up, cracked the windows open to let some fresh air in, quickly checked the woman before heading to the bar. A burly guy outside, Travis, 6'7", 275 pounds of mostly muscle. Mostly because over recent years, the natural aging process had taken over, and the simple fact was that he was past his peak as an athlete or a fighter, or whatever he'd been in his early 20s. Still, he was perfectly big enough and strong enough and well-rehearsed enough in brawling to be a good bouncer in a small town like this, where generally everyone knew each other anyway. "Evening," Peake said with a relaxed smile. Travis checked his watch. "Couldn't stay away even on your night off, huh?" Nothing untoward about the man's reaction to seeing him, which meant Adam hadn't arrived here bleeding, crying foul about Peake. "Can't get enough," Peake said, though apparently not with the right amount of sarcasm, as Travis looked a little unsure for a second. "This place? Or you mean a certain someone inside?" Travis winked. Peake carried on past. Loud rock music from the jukebox played inside. Boisterous chatter fought for control of the airwaves and took on a whole other level of rowdiness the moment Peake pushed open the door to go inside. He clocked Jen first, behind the bar. She didn't take notice, too busy wooing a couple of bulky tattooed guys who had empty shot glasses in front of them to go along with their beers. She leaned over toward them, whiskey bottle in hand, her eye-popping cleavage resting on the bar right in front of them. She really knew how to work the tips out of these suckers. Which explained why the owner, a local businessman called Frank Booker, had her working as much as possible these days. Often on her own, even on a weekend night, as there simply wasn't another barwoman in this town who could compete with her. And none of the punters wanted to be served by a guy. Oh, and Frank took 50% of her tips, of course. Win-win. Or something like that. Peake quickly scanned the rest of the large space in front of him. A classic small-town bar. Wood panelling, tables, booths, neon signs on the walls, Americana. A couple of pool tables, which was where most of the noise was coming from. A group of about 15 were over there, all men except for 3. Rowdy, but they were enjoying themselves, at least for now. Peake recognised most of the faces. It wasn't really the kind of town that tourists or business visitors came to. That said, a man and a woman at a booth in the far corner weren't regulars, at least not to Peake's knowledge. And as he neared the bar and caught a glimpse of their faces, he realised he didn't know the 2 gruff-looking men who Jen had been serving either. She fixed him with a wide smile when she spotted him, and the 2 guys looked his way too, clearly a little disgruntled that he'd stolen her attention. He found a stool a few spots away from them, and Jen soon came over. "Hi, handsome," she said. "Didn't expect you here tonight." Like Travis, she didn't seem at all rattled to see him. So, Adam hadn't been in touch with his sister. Was he lying dead in the field somewhere? "Yeah, it's unexpected for me too." She leaned over toward him, and he kind of wished she hadn't tonight, with eyes already on him. But still, he moved forward too and kissed her cheek. Her smile widened even further, if that was possible. The 2 tattooed guys looked really sullen now and turned away from the bar, beer glasses in hand, as though to signal they'd had enough of Jen, now they realised her friendliness hadn't meant she had any real interest in either of them. Their fault for being deluded in the first place. Why'd he drink him? He really wanted another beer, but would it do any good at this point in the night? "Beer and a chaser, please." "You got it, babe." She fixed the drinks while Peake looked around again. No one paying him any attention. Why would they? "You look like you've had a rough night," Jen said, putting a large beer and a whiskey down in front of him. "It's not exactly gone as planned." He downed the whiskey, then sank half the beer in 2 big mouthfuls. "Damn, I needed that." She looked at him a little dubiously. "Something happened?" "Kind of." "You want to talk?" Which was exactly why he'd gone to Slugs. He didn't know many people in this town well. He knew Jen and her brother, for good and for bad. Out of anyone here, he trusted her the most, and knew she'd help him. After all, he'd helped her out in the past. His first night here, he had pulled 3 drunk out-of-town bikers off of her around the back of the bar. They'd lived, but they'd not come back to this bar, this town, again. And then the second time he'd helped her, her brother too was... No, he wasn't dwelling on that tonight. When did you last hear from your brother? Immediately suspicion on her face, but he had to ask. Not since you went to Florida? Why? Peake shrugged. He wanted my help with something, so if you see him, tell him I can do it, yeah? What's he getting you mixed up in this time? Peake laughed, a bit too forcedly. It's nothing, but what? I kind of need a place to crash, he said. Kinda? Not kind of. I do need a place to crash. Just tonight? Maybe a few nights. Frank found a buyer for the farm? He didn't say. Frank Booker, the local businessman. He owned the bar, the farm too. The majority of every business in Prenticeville had Frank Booker's stamp on it one way or another. No buyer yet, just, I'm not sure it's going to work out for me there now. More to handle than you thought. I could kind of tell you weren't the farming type. She laughed at that, and the 2 big guys looked over momentarily, still looking disgruntled. Peake didn't respond to the joke, but he'd never pretended to be the farming type anyway, and Frank hadn't wanted that. Just someone to keep the place in some sort of shape while he worked on selling it. The house, well, the soon-to-be charred shell, had been pretty much worthless anyway, but the 40 acres of land had value. What Frank didn't have was the capacity to realise full value from it, nor did he have a line of interested parties to take it off of his hands. So Peake had been a bit of a go-between. Free board for him, and for Frank, a part-time bouncer at the bar, getting a reduced rate of pay because of the favour, plus someone to do the basics of looking after the land while he tried to figure things out. Which basically meant Peake doing what he could to not let the land go to complete shit, keeping squatters, meth heads and the like away, while Frank worked favours with the town and county to try and get clearance for a development which would see the land value skyrocket. Frank certainly wouldn't be pleased with how Peake's custody of his land had turned out. You okay in there? Jen asked, snapping Peake from his thoughts. He noted the even more dubious look on her face now. Yeah, he said. You can crash at mine if you want. A slight glint in her eye at that suggestion, and it wouldn't be the first time he'd stayed there with her, but that really was the last thing on his mind tonight. That's not going to work this time. She looked more pissed than disappointed at the rejection. Jen, it's not like that, but something came up. I need to lay low. I don't want you to be involved. Then why are you asking for my help? Fair point. Wait, this has something to do with Adam, right? What the hell are you 2 up to? What about your dad's place? Peake said, hoping she would take the bait of the change of subject. You want to stay in my dad's house? Her disdain at his suggestion was clear. No, but he has the stables, and the horses have gone already. You'd rather sleep in a barn than with me? He put his hand on hers. That's not it. I just need somewhere quiet, away from anywhere. I can explain another time. You're really giving off some creepy vibes right now. What are you running from? I'm not running. Hiding, then. Peake didn't say anything to that. You know he's out of town for a few weeks, she said, looking around as though she expected someone was listening. But the house is off limits. If you really want to sleep in the stables. She shrugged. Thank you. But the fact you'd rather stay there than with me? She shook her head at him, then responded when a group of 3 guys the other side of the bar signalled to her. She went off without saying another word. Peake finished his beer. He wanted to get out of there.
You two look pretty cozy together,
one of the burly guys at the bar said to Peake.
Yeah. Do I know you? Don't think so. Huh.
He turned back to his friend, and the two of them leaned into one another to whisper. Jem was soon done and strode back toward Peake, but the guy who had spoken moments before reached across the bar and grabbed her wrist. Peake flinched, but then remained rooted. Unless this was about to turn really ugly, he didn't need any more problems tonight. Jen whipped her arm free and tried her best to smile and look easy. Another drink, fellas?
Yeah, same.
She got to it.
What? No chit-chat this time?
The one who'd spoken to Peake said when she put the drinks down.
And she put her tits away too, fucking cock tease.
Jen, her low-cut top riding higher now than before, moved away from them, and the guys followed her movement, eventually locking eyes with Peake.
What?
The guy nearest him challenged. Peake said nothing, just continued to glare.
You want to say something?
Peake did, but he decided not to. Leave it, they're fine, Jen said, gently pulling on his arm.
Yeah, love boy. Do what your little bitch tells you.
Please, Jen said to him. Peake relented. Okay. I'll see you soon, yeah? She paused a moment, then sighed. Why do I feel a little used here? Sorry, Jen. I'll explain another time. Tonight, I just need... It's okay. She leaned over and pecked his cheek. And when my brother surfaces, I'll tell him you're looking for him.
Please do.
He saw the glint in her eye. Nothing suggestive about it. Sadness. Regret. He understood why. He wanted nothing more than to forget about the last few hours, take her out of there, and wrap her up in his arms for the night.
Can I ask you something?
He said to her, pulling himself back to grim reality and well aware the guys were still looking over. Shoot. He beckoned her closer.
You know a man named Hardy?
He whispered.
Local scumbag, maybe?
She pulled back from him. He really couldn't read the look on her face, unusual as she usually sold her feelings pretty openly. Do you? He prompted. No, she said. Someone else was wanting a drink, so she took the opportunity to rush off.
Ouch! Bet that hurt!
Came the call from one of the 2 men. Peake got up from his stool and dragged himself away from the bar and the hecklers, even though he could still hear their insults all the way to the door.
That was quick,
Travis said as the bar door closed behind him. Peake said nothing as he scanned the parked trucks. Not too hard to find. There was only one Chevy. He'd spotted the tattooed guy's key on top of his wallet on the bar.
You see the 2 guys who arrived in that thing?
Peake said, indicating the top of the range truck, a huge thing that towered over the other vehicles.
Yeah,
Travis said.
They're giving Jen a hard time.
Travis kind of snorted.
You know them?
Peake asked.
No, of them. Frank's doing some business with them, apparently. Something he and McGinty had going on together.
Thomas McGinty, Peake assumed, Adam and Jen's father.
What business?
Another shrug.
I'm just the dumb dole man.
Except Travis was anything but dumb. He had a decent degree from a decent college, but he had been dragged back to Prenticeville 5 years ago to look after his ailing mother. Here, a college degree did little for him and took whatever money he could. Apparently, he had a long-term plan, but thoughts of that were for another time.
When they get here?
Peake asked.
The bar?
Town.
A couple of days ago.
You know anything about what business?
Didn't I already say?
Kind of. Though Peake hadn't been sure whether the previous response was only one of petulance. Like I said, they're giving Jen a hard time. Can you do me a favour?
You want me to turn them over?
Travis said.
Not sure Frank would like that.
Just look out for her. Make sure she gets out of here tonight.
I always do.
Bruh, there's a girl in the back of here,
came a voice from across the parking lot. Peake looked over to see two scrawny youngsters, early 20s perhaps, over by the bushes. One was smoking and on the lookout, while the other relieved his bladder. Apparently, the bush was a better option than the bar's toilet. Well, Peake had seen that place too many times, so maybe they were right. "Hey!" Peake shouted, walking toward them.
"Seriously?"
the smoker said to his friend, nudging him in the side.
"There's some woman passed out in there."
Both moved closer to Peake's car. He glanced back to Travis as he moved. The bouncer had taken interest too, had moved a couple of steps forward.
"Get the hell away from my truck!"
Peake shouted, finally getting their attention.
"You kidnap her or something? Bet he's a serial killer."
Though they both thought it was funny.
"Get out of here!"
The guys headed back to the bar as Travis approached.
"What was that?"
he asked, a questioning look on his face. Peake simply shrugged and turned his hands out.
"Remember what I said about Jen?"
"Of course."
Peake looked through the glass to the woman inside his truck, still not awake, but at least now he had a place to take her to. His gaze switched again to the Chevy. He could imagine the satisfaction of going over there, slashing a tyre, breaking a window. He pictured the two guys spilling out of the bar in response, the brawl that would likely follow, the looks on their faces when they finally realised they'd made a big mistake, when they got what they deserved. Tonight wasn't that night, and a part of Peake hated that fact.
"You sure you're okay?"
Travis asked. But then the sound of heightened shouting from inside took his attention. Breaking glass, too.
Shit.
He dashed off for the bar.